Hello, guys. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of Regan's Rugby Strength and Conditioning. Got a strength and conditioning coach who's from Switzerland. His name is Sean Seale from Upside Strength. He's also got his own podcast show, and he's given us some time this Monday morning. So, cheers for coming on, Sean, and giving us some of your time. I could have said
it's a pleasure, man. I always enjoy chatting with other coaches and other people in the industry who are, who like what they do. So anytime I can make for that is always a good time.
Wicked, good. I messaged you and you said that your podcast is full for about 4 months, right?
I've got, so what I used to do was kind of record haphazardly anytime I had time, but my schedule has become pretty packed. And so my wife encouraged me. She's my little, how to say that, organizational guru. So she just pushed me to structure my week a little bit better, which makes total sense. I should have done it a long time ago. So I try to only record once a week now on Friday afternoons, and I book 2 to 3 recordings a week. And yeah, that's packed until July. I'm booking into July now, so I'm pretty. It's good. It's good.
That's
good problem to have.
Yeah. When I think I discovered that a couple of months ago, and I'd messaged 5-6 people, and then they'd all booked for the same week. And so like that's 5 or 6 hours out of my normal week, and it was crazy, and I was knackered. So like finding where to put your attention is important. And I guess like I maybe was a few years ago, you have your feet in a few sort of things going on. You do some personal training, some personal strength and conditioning. You just said before we hit record, some work with the Swiss Academy rugby team. You got rugby team as well, adults team. So why don't you tell the guys a bit more about, let's talk about your background first, actually, before we get to what you're doing now.
Okay, cool. So my name's Sean. I'm 32. I live in Switzerland, Nyon, Switzerland. It's close to the French border. It's right on Lake Geneva. I was born and raised here. I left when I was 22. Went to travel the world a little bit. Went to Australia for 6 months. Then went to Vancouver. Ended up staying there for a few months and met my wife through a nice rugby function. To speak nicely, it was a nice party at the rugby club in Vancouver, and we're in Burnaby where I was playing back then, and that's where I met my wife. We stayed there. We stayed in Vancouver for a few years, and we actually came back to Switzerland 2 years ago now. So
it's quite recent then, yeah.
It's quite recent. Yeah, came back here. Actually moved back in with my mom. Now we've taken over the apartment, so I'm now recording in the room where I grew up as a kid.
That's well cool.
And my mom's got her own apartment now, so that all worked out quite well.
That's cool. My family's Canadian. I don't know if I said that before.
No,
my family's all around Toronto. My brother lives there now. Did you go to Canada for travel and then you got involved in the rugby team, or was it to play sport? Was that a reason?
No, it was really just I was sick of Switzerland. I'd done a year and a half in the army and I loved it, but at the same time, I just couldn't. I just needed a change of pace, and hence the traveling. And I was playing rugby at the time. I started playing when I was 17. I joined the local team. My brother was playing there, had been playing for a year. And so I just joined and had a blast and continued playing for a few years. And so when I traveled there, my first aim was to find a rugby club that I could join and play with. And one of my friends at the time, she used to live with the girlfriend of the number 8 of the first team of that Burnaby club. And so she said, hey, you should go train with those guys, which I did. And like I said, I ended up after 2 weeks in Canada meeting my wife at one of the rugby parties. So,
meant to be, eh?
Exactly.
I guess the rugby's not massive in Switzerland for kids and the publicity or whatever.
No, it's definitely not a national level sport. It's growing. It's still growing slowly. And I think the structure of the different championships, the different leagues, the academy on the country level, all those things are slowly building up. Switzerland had a pretty good season. The first team, the senior team, had a pretty good season last year. They were about to play. I think they were about to play. Was it the Netherlands in March when everything closed down? It was literally the weekend that everything closed down. On the Friday, they announced like shutdowns and everything. And I think it was the last game that would determine their group rankings for them to maybe go up a group. They might be in Group D, and I think they were going up to Group C, or maybe it was one lower. I'm not sure. So it's not a crazy high level of rugby here. I don't have any reference for English rugby, but for French rugby it would be between Honneur and Federal 3 pretty much. That would be for the top championship level in Switzerland, and then the Swiss team has some good players, a lot of French players from Federal 3 to Federal 1, so that they've got a good crew, and yeah, they were doing pretty good before the shutdown. Now it's all up in the air.
Yeah. Have you not been able to train the rugby teams?
So lockdown at the beginning of COVID, didn't do anything until about the summer. So I think July we picked back up. We did a good preseason. Season starts here around September, and we did September, October, and they shut us back down at the end of October. And since then, there hasn't been anything. We just picked back up about 3 weeks ago now, but still no contact, still small groups, distances. So there's no competition agenda at this point. So the guys literally just get together once a week, just to run around and play ball. But I haven't been involved again with the local team on the physical preparation side, because they just need to spend some time together right now.
So how do people find out about rugby if it's not like big? Because in Hungary here, like we train next to the American football team, and because American football is on normal TVs, it's a lot more bigger sport, and they've got like 3 leagues of like 10 teams each, and we've got 2 leagues of I think 6 teams. And like to even know what rugby is, I explain to people. I mean, my Hungarian is pretty poor, but I explain to people, and they're like, rugby, like they almost don't even know what the word is. So like how like compared to that, so how many sort of teams or leagues are there? Is it more than that, or because it sounds like the standard's a bit better?
We've got across the country, if I'm not mistaken, we've got 4 senior leagues, League A through D. We're in the A League with Neon, with my local team here. Every first team or every A League team needs to have a reserve team as well. So it's to encourage, clubs having numbers and being able to grow the sport.
They need to have a reserve team.
Yeah, they need to have a reserve team if they want to play in the A League. So yeah, there's actually the top team in the B League doesn't have enough numbers, so they bypass moving up into the A group every year, because they just don't want the trouble of having to find more people. They just want to,
But they're good enough.
They're good enough to win the B League. So we got this. We got a women's league as well, and then we got junior leagues, all the way from the bottom, the young kids, where they do tournaments locally, and then I believe starting U16, U18, you have a bit more of a structured championship throughout the year as well. And then, like I mentioned before, we have the academy as well for the youth age groups. How to say that? Hopefuls for the Swiss teams, which is slowly developing as well. So it's getting there. There's more structure. There's more education for the coaches. There's more and more players. There's a big expat community here in Switzerland. So a lot of people coming from England and other how to say that? Well, English speaking countries first of all, but rugby influenced countries, and so they often bring a lot of this with them. And so there's a good mix between, locals, a bunch of French people as well who moved over here. And obviously there's a big rugby culture over there. Some locals, some French, and some expats. That's pretty much kind of the makeup of the Swiss rugby.
All of them, or just from the main cities and where you are? Or is that most of the clubs?
It's most of the clubs. You look at most of the A-League teams, and there's 3 of them are right around Geneva, so big French influence, a bunch of French players who obviously maybe evolved at a high level before, that come and play here, or just that just end up playing here in Switzerland. Zurich has a pretty big group of expats as well. So I would say it's across the board, probably more expats in the A League and the B League. And maybe the lower tier leagues have more local folks, and maybe less of that influence from abroad, I would say.
I think because there's one team in Hungary, the Budapest. Their name is the Budapest Exiles, and they are basically English players and French players and a few from random places, maybe South Africa, and because they've played rugby since they were sort of younger, so like the skills are all there. Whereas the other players, some guys in my team, they only picked up a ball when they're like 17, 18.
Yeah.
So it's I think the people around here, they're fit and they're athletic. They like their judo, they like their water sports, but they don't really know the basics. So like there's some units crashing into each other in the game, and it's almost funny because like let's see, a lot of the skills are lower. If there's like a giant man, it will be like under 11s and he'll be running like 50 meters because people aren't sure how to take him down. But yeah, it's the rugby skills that need to come off, I think, because there's a lot of fit athletic guys here, and it's just about them being aware of the sport. I think the Hungarian team or government, they're putting a lot into sevens because they've got a better chance of getting into the Olympics through there, which is like just something they're looking for. So there's big sevens tournaments and they do a lot of international tournaments. But yeah, I think the same thing, just trying to get the sport up, really.
Yeah, I think sevens is probably a good gateway to building the sport because it requires logistically and from a numbers standpoint, it's a lot easier. So if you can develop, I think Portugal did a great job a few years back with this. If I'm not mistaken, they really pushed the sevens team, and that led to growth of rugby in general in the country, which allowed them to then have a decent, union team as well. So I definitely think it's a good way to take if you're going to, invest in the sport and try to grow it.
So we've spoke about your rugby teams you're involved with, but you also do one-to-one strength and conditioning, personal training, and some testing of some sorts you mentioned before. It's too technical for me. So how else do you spend your time?
Yeah, so I've got, I'll take the typical week. I've got between, I'd say 15 and 20 hours of private coaching. Right now with the restrictions, the gyms are closed, so I'm traveling to my clients' houses. So I've got a bit of a traveling circus going on. I load my rower in the car and a couple dumbbells and off I go. So that's, I'd say, most of my week. And then, like you said before, I have a podcast, so that takes up a few hours of the week as well. I follow a few people remotely, so remote coaching, mostly do the programming and the follow-ups on that. And like you said, I do some, and then I do the strength and conditioning with the rugby team here and the Swiss Academy. So just the physical preparation side, the testing and the programming. And then I do some physiological testing as well. So that's more geared towards, at this point, I do a lot of work with some CrossFit people and some endurance sports folks. And the idea is to essentially try to figure out what is limiting the athlete's performance at this point in time from a physiological perspective. So to speak very simply, is it a muscular limitation? So is it the muscle that's not being able to extract the oxygen maybe fast enough or well enough? Is it the heart that's too weak for the demands? Or is it the respiratory system, so the breathing, that is limiting the performance? And so through some specific protocols and using some measurement tools, we're able to assess that on an individual basis and recommend some specific interventions from a training standpoint to address those limitations. So essentially it's looking beyond just, say, the performance numbers that they're able to put out on a given test, but how do they perform during this test? How do all those systems interact? And where can they find the most benefit in terms of trying to improve their performance?
That's cool. I was going to ask what sort of people you do that with, but it's more high-level CrossFit athletes and endurance.
Not necessarily high level. There's some kind of recreational but highly invested in their training type folks that I'm working with as well. I'm starting to shift to using the technology with the rugby guys as well. One little project that I'm trying to set up now is essentially use the tech that I have in order to measure what's going on during different popular fitness tests in rugby. So you take a Bronco, you take a Cooper test, you take there's a 30-15 IFT. I mean, there's lots of different tests that the Australian, the Welsh anaerobic test. There's lots of different tests that are used around the world. So I think for me, what's interesting now is trying to understand those different testing protocols from a physiological standpoint. What are we seeing when those guys do the test? And then how does that relate to the actual demands of rugby, right? Because I was talking about the tech that I'm using is called the Moxie monitor. It's a NIRS device. So to speak very simply, It's a device you just strap to your leg, for example, to your quad, and you're able to see in real time the balance between oxygen delivery and oxygen utilization. So how much oxygen are you bringing to the muscle from the breathing and the heart, and then how much oxygen are you utilizing at the muscle. And so that gives you kind of some information as to what kind of effort you're producing. And so trying to put that onto someone when they're playing a game of rugby, obviously with the different positions in mind, because the way a winger is going to play is not going to be the same in terms of the demands as a front rower. But try to put this tech on the guys while they're playing, see the real physiological demands of the game of rugby, and then see out of all the tests that exist, which one is actually the closest. The chances are that none of them are very close at all, given that, most of those fitness tests are continuous, when rugby, and as you know, and everybody listening here knows, it's very much an intermittent sport where you have a high intensity effort, whether it's a scrum or a sprint or a run or a ruck, and then you have a bunch of rests on the back end. So how can we assess that better is one of my interest points, and definitely being able to understand all those physiological ramifications better to, again, hopefully better inform the athletes that I train and improve their programming. But I think really what this brings to the table is the individual side of it. You can have two guys, to give a very practical example, you can have two guys that have the exact same time on, say, a Bronco test, for example, but how they got to that performance might be completely different. And what those two guys need to train respectively might be different as well. And so how can we optimize that is kind of what I'm interested in right now.
Yeah, and that's testing only one part of it, like kind of agility, kind of straight line running. Whereas, like you said, they're stopping and starting. And it's very hard to get like a perfect test, especially for rugby, because there's so many million things that you can test.
Exactly.
I think with other sports, it could be easier. But the testing maybe is more of like a mass effort, and it's kind of like a generic, let's see how these have improved in this amount. But when you're getting high tech like Sean, you get little machines all over you. How big was it? Can you show me again? Is it still there? It's only a little machine. Can you strap that on a game? I thought you're not meant to have any plastic on you.
So
It's that old school rule.
You probably can't do it with the regulations, but I would do it in a training setting. So that's the device. And so there's a light shield. That's the device right here. And then there's just a light shield. So when you put it, say, on the leg, essentially it shines a light inside the muscle with an LED. You can't see them here, but there's an LED emitter in here, and there's two sensors. And essentially the light is shone, if it's the right
what is
way
the
to conjugate
Sean,
this word.
I think Sean, yeah.
It's shone into the tissues, and essentially whether and it's going to get just a little bit technical here, but I'll try to make it as simple as possible. We have hemoglobin in the red blood cells that carry oxygen, right? And we have myoglobin, which do the same inside the muscle. And so what this sensor is able to do is look at the total amount of hemoglobin and myoglobin. So think of them as taxi cabs for oxygen, okay? And so they're able to see, okay, how much blood is under the sensor. So we talk about blood volume, so we can see how you're pushing blood through your body during an effort, during rest intervals, etc. And you're able to see out of the total taxi cab pool that you have that's bringing the oxygen from circulation into the muscle to be utilized, how much of those are still carrying oxygen and how much are not. So you get a percentage value. So out of 100 taxi cabs, I have 8 at rest. I might want to have 80, about 80% of them that are carrying oxygen. And then during an effort, obviously, you're going to see that go down because we use oxygen instantaneously to power cellular respiration. And so essentially to make energy, to produce muscular contractions, to recycle ATP, we use oxygen inside the muscle instantaneously. And so that device allows you to kind of tell in real time what's going on.
I really appreciate the analogies, because I said before, he might need to dumb it down for, first of all, me, and then second of all, maybe some listeners.
I hope it was clear enough.
I think on your podcast, you've got a lot of sort of high performance coaches, right? You'll be getting very scientific, and that ain't my gag. But you've got these debates. If you like more debates like that, go on the Upside Strength, sorry, wrong strength.
No problem.
Brand. Upside Strength podcast, and there's a lot more intricate scientific debates, which is not my thing. On the background, I forgot to say. So when did you go from I'm playing to I'm going to start, it's probably like me, like, let's help up with some fitness sessions. Let's do a PT course. Like, when did that part happen? And while I'm doing that, I need to plug in my laptop.
Oh, do so, yeah. So I was, it's kind of started when I've always been interested in physical performance. I remember back in the day when I started playing rugby. So I was 17, 18, hitting the gym before the field. I never did squats. I didn't even know that the leg day didn't exist. And I was proud of using dumbbells when everybody was using a Smith machine for their bench press, because I thought it was better for some reason.
You're an elite because of that.
Exactly. So, I really thought that I was separating myself from the masses by doing dumbbell bench presses versus Smith machine bench presses, which is funny in hindsight. But so always interested in that. When I went to Canada, played there, and then I had to manage my health to keep my student visa when I was over there. So I couldn't afford to get a big injury through rugby and not be able to go to school, because I was going to BCIT. I was taking a pipe fitting course, and essentially my visa was dependent on me going to school. And so I decided to not play rugby while I was doing that. And I found CrossFit. I did that for about a year, just in my garage. I had a bunch of stuff. I took like some intro courses with one of the local gyms in Vancouver, and then I just did my little thing. But again, digging into everything, listening to podcasts, reading on it. Was never interested in competing in CrossFit, but through CrossFit I discovered Olympic weightlifting, and that I was really interested in. So I started competing in the sport, and I did a couple years of dedicated training and competition in British Columbia. So that was fun, and I was literally spending I was painting houses at the time, and so I was training between 8 and 10 hours a week. So spending 2 to 2.5 hours in the gym 3 to 4 times a week. On top of that,
for CrossFit, don't you?
Well, yeah, that was for weightlifting. Yeah, exactly. So lots of time, obviously lots of rest time between heavy sets.
Did you have a chair? You must have had a chair in the corner.
Definitely had a chair. And anytime I was working, I was on my ladders painting my houses, and I was listening to podcasts. I remember reading The Science and Practice of Strength Training from Zatsiorski and Kramer on the bus on my way to work. So that's the kind of I was all in. Mm-hmm. And again, my wife, I told you, she's my I wouldn't be much without her. One day she said, you know what, maybe you should start getting people to pay you for all the studying you're doing. Mm-hmm. And so I said, hey, that makes sense. So I quit my job and passed a certified personal trainer exam with the NSCA and started coaching. So that's really where it all began. And
then just developed from there, different sports you kept learning, and obviously it moved around with you.
Exactly. Mostly private clients to start, and but started working with the rugby club in Vancouver as well, a little bit inside the gym. But I mean, from that moment on, that was that was my passion, and that's what I did. And anytime I wasn't coaching or training myself, I was studying in some way or another, whether it's through podcasts, through books, through reading, and trying to all bring it back. Sometimes, reading a little bit farther away from strength and conditioning specific stuff, but always try to bring it back to what I do with the coaching and the training. And obviously took it to the next level last year when I started my podcast. And like you said, being able to...
You started it last year as well?
I started it, end of 2019, December 2019. So
wicked, man.
Yeah, I'm a year and a bit in. And that's obviously a massive opportunity to talk to other coaches and see different perspective and learn different stuff. I really take it as a learning opportunity for me. It's my continuing education program. So I invite who I want to talk to, and then I learn from them, and then
just grill them and get some notes down.
Exactly. And so that's it's been pretty fulfilling, and then being able to obviously share that with everybody is cool.
And then going back to studying training and fitness and strength and conditioning was passion, and doing that as a job without getting all hippie is very rewarding to do something that you've just done for fun since you were a teenager. And then it was like, for me as well, I did a degree, I think it was business and environmental science. I did a few months in a normal job, quotations. I was like, fuck this, man, what am I doing? Like, this is fucking bullshit. Because like you, I think every minute of every day was a video, a book, or I wasn't listening to much podcasts until lately. And it's just filling your brain, and you'd be helping this friend, doing a training program for a friend, training with a buddy. And I was like, why am I just fucking getting on the train for 2 hours a day? Why don't I just do something a bit useful, a bit more fun as well? And also, I think when I first started, my learning maybe stopped because I was in a gym doing like a gym manager type job and doing personal training as well. And I thought I was the man, like I was doing strongman, and I'd quit this job and now I'm in the gym. And I admit to people that I didn't learn much more for the probably 1 or 2 years, because I was thinking like, oh, I'm here now, I've got a six pack, I compete in strong, blah, blah, blah. And I know myself, I didn't develop much in those first year or two. And then I had to sort of quit the gym job because that was taking 40 hours of my life for fucking £8 or £9 an hour. And then you've got time to then study a bit more and learn a bit more. And then you can get different types of clients. And then that was more of like an even transition of still learning about it. And then I can implement it and yada, yada, yada. So that was my transition back.
No, I can relate to that. I think I was very certain of things that I knew at the beginning, and I grow ever less certain every day now.
The more people we talk, and geniuses like this guy, I have to ask him to not outshine me on the podcast. I remember because my background was rugby and sports. I remember having a lady in her 40s who was like moderate weight, like not fit and not overweight. And I asked her to do a plank and she couldn't do it. And I was like, what do you mean you can't do it? She's like, I can't do it, it's too hard. I was like, what are you talking about? It's a plank, like what's wrong with you? And I had no idea that that's still like a level of strength. And my only interaction with helping people training was boys I could swear at rugby or friends I was training with. And then when I had to train other girls or anyone else, I was kind of stumped. And for that year, I was just a bit stumped. And obviously now I'd say 95% of people are the rugby type players that I grew up with or guys that I understand more. But when I was in a gym, that first year or two, I'd be like, what do you mean you can't do a log press? Log press is the best thing in the world. Everyone should do a log press every week.
Yeah, I was the same, barbells, weightlifting, CrossFit. That's kind of how I got in the game. And so for me, right off the bat, it was, okay, well, if we're going to be training, we're going to be doing back squats and deadlifts and bench presses. And I couldn't have been farther from the truth. Like you said, those are all advanced movements in my book now. And most people that I work with on a fitness, general health level, they don't need a barbell in their hands. There's so much that we can do without. So, discovering basic stuff like dumbbells and cable machines. At first, I had no interest for them, and I didn't like them. But I'm realizing now that all the things that I didn't like at some point, I didn't like because I didn't understand. So I didn't like cable machines because I didn't know how to use it properly. And now I love cable machines. I used to hate elastic bands, and now I swear by them, especially in this COVID times. There's so much you can do if you just think, in a certain way, and you can pretty much do anything that you want with very little equipment, and any equipment that you have is always a bonus as long as you know how to use it. So I think I've kind of come full circle and exploring, after I found the barbell stuff, exploring all the other training options and modalities, and realizing that, again, everything's a tool. It's all tools, and it's just our job to know which tool to use in what situation, but not kind of off the bat put aside a whole bunch of tools just because we don't like them or we don't understand them. They have their place. We just need to understand why.
I think that term of not understanding, because when I did, let's say, week one of getting a personal training certificate, all I knew was barbells, strongman and rugby. And so I was like, what do you mean you can't do a plank? What's wrong with you? Or like for some people, a long walk, they're quite tired, like maybe someone who's not very fit. And I was like, it's a warm up. What's wrong with you? And like my language was probably poor. And like, if I could like zap back and watch from the corner some of my sessions, I would have been like, what the hell are you doing, man?
Yeah. I think it's, what is it? It's the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Where you start and you think you know everything. And then as time goes by, that trend goes down and you realize, you don't know much at all. And then only after a substantial amount of time spent learning and trying to develop your thinking, you slowly climb back up and actually, learn stuff, and you can actually have some valid ideas and conclusions. But yeah, at the start, you're all guns blazing. You think you know everything. You think it's super simple, and you're gonna just revolutionize the world with the way that you do things. And it's just you go from one humbling experience to the next when whatever model you had in your head doesn't apply to the real world, and realize slowly that, hey, there's a bit more nuance in that thing that we thought at the beginning. And you need to approach it with a critical mindset if you want to do well.
Yeah, it's continuously progressing the coaching and stuff. I was going to ask, before the COVID stuff, are you gym based as well, or were you in a gym, or was it all kind of field or home visits before?
Yeah, I had a few of my clients at the gym. I had a few private at people's houses as well already. So I had to obviously shift to no gym and all either outside or in a home training for now. But yeah, I have a friend who's got a gym nearby, and so I coach clients there when the gym's open, and I do the testing over there as well, and stuff like that.
We're like I said, we just moved here, and there's a structure out the back that we're going to turn into a gym, and we're deciding on the roofing. I'm no builder, whatever. We're deciding on the roofing, and I think the first layer is too low for a military press, and the top layer is high enough. And we're debating, like, apparently if you put the roofing on the top, it's a lot more difficult. And I thought to myself, I've not done a military press for about 8 months now because I haven't been to a gym. So I think I'll survive if my home gym, I have to do it seated or something, or a Z press. Is it? That's it.
Z press, yeah.
I could do that. But yeah, we're in a village now. We're going on another tangent now. We're in a village now. There's a brand new bodyweight park like 2 kilometers away, and It's like one of the best ones I've seen. So I asked these guys in the group if they've got any weight vest suggestions, because I think I'm just going to do that until my little gym is built.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
But yeah, going off a tangent about my home DIY, that is. Cool. I think that's most of the thing I was going to run through, Sean. It's been awesome learning about Swiss rugby and what you were doing. Did you come back for a job, or did you just restart your coaching in Switzerland?
Yeah, so it took a year to transition back into coaching full time. In which time I had a job at 80%, so I was working 32 hours a week for a local store doing logistics, so like getting all the shipments in the morning for the restaurant and for the store and organizing all that. And on top of this, I was doing some coaching and then the physical prep with the rugby team. So it was a pretty hectic year. And then, so it's been a year now, a bit over a year since I started full time again coaching here, because I obviously had to kind of restart from scratch, coming back over here. So yeah, it took a little bit of time to do the transition, but now I'm full time coaching again, which is cool.
I give mega props to anyone who is like foreign and moves to a country and starts either personal training or strength and conditioning, whatever, because no one. Like I think when I was gym manager, to transition to full time, it was about 9 months. And that was my hometown, and I had a very sociable upbringing. So there was loads of friends and family coming in, and that kind of helped me until I had a normal client base. But someone like Viv, who came to London, no one. Like it must be so difficult restarting. And I think this is why I started the online version, so I was more geographically flexible. But if I didn't have any online income and I tried to do personal training or strength and conditioning coaching in any new city, like you don't know anyone. You've got to literally talk to everyone in the gym. I have mega props to anyone that does it.
Yeah, well, I was in the same situation as you since I grew up here, so I knew pretty much everybody.
You went back to that?
Yeah, so I spent 20 years of my life here, so I knew everybody. But still, it takes time, like you said, to find new clients. And over the last year, trying to think about, obviously with COVID, forces you to maybe reframe everything and trying to, have different streams of income, not relying solely on one source. All those kind of things. That's obviously more on the business side, but it's also important, I think, as coaches, as trainers, that we don't just have one. If you only have one source of income, your one client, your one you're one client away from not having a job, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So if you lose that one source of income, then you're shit out of luck. So
Mm-hmm.
I think trying to think, it's good to be passionate about our job, and it's good to do it every day, but we have to put food on the table as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so being considerate from that standpoint, obviously that wasn't the way that I thought from day one, but through the years, trying to be a bit more professional, I guess, in the way that I think about the business and running the business is important as well.
Because I'm not sure what your personal training and conditioning course was like, but in England, where ours was, it is only about, I mean, it's the most absolute basics, and part of it, which you could fail on, is making sure that someone has their hand on the treadmill, puts their closer leg on, then puts their second leg on, then their other hand. That's how stupid it is. And then it's nothing to do with the business stuff, which actually helps people to, have a conversation with a member of a gym or a sports club to actually guide them through the process of finding out if they're good enough for you. And I think that should be like really involved a lot more, because I'm very happy to help. I know a few trainers from my old gym who I chat to quite often. But before, like, I guess you found out as well, you have to do your own research to find out what marketing is and how to actually share your knowledge on a level that people understand. And yeah, I think that needs to be pushed more in these first courses and stuff. Otherwise, I think the personal training like dropout rate in the first year is like 80% or something.
Yeah, it's massive.
Because they have no clue how to talk to people. It's more about just playing good level football when you were younger, or you're a good tennis player, whatever. But yeah, it's important to know how to like screen someone. Are you good or not? For me, if you are, let's rock and roll. And I think those skills are not taught to people who maybe do these courses in their late teens, and then they just plonk in a gym. And in England, I don't know what it's like. In England, you might be paying a gym £600 a month for rent from day one, and like you got to just make money, and you don't have any manager, you don't have any motivator. So it's like it's difficult to start with. Again, another off tangent there, but
no, I think it's a very important point that you bring up, and I fully agree. I think the psychological aspect of what we do and the interpersonal aspect of the job is absolutely underappreciated, and like you said, usually completely absent from any certifications that you might do. When really it's we're in the people business, right? How do you listen to someone and their needs? How do you create a long-lasting relationship that's going to create buy-in and ensure that they stick to their program on the long term? Because no matter what the program is, long term, this is what is going to bring the results, right? It doesn't matter how good your program is. If they quit after 2 months, then you probably didn't do a good job enough, because you lost them, and that's going to show on their health and fitness long term. So I think how do you retain clients? How do you create buy-in for the long term? How do you create incremental progress? How do you keep the goals achievable, and all those kind of things? And like you said, talking to people, listening to them, it's super important. And I wish it was more of an emphasis as well, because like you said, I think it would help a lot of trainers and in their first years just better navigate the space and know what they're getting into, right? I think when I took my certification, I took it from a book, right? I read the book and I challenged the exam, and I was certified, and I could work. And thankfully, I had hundreds of hours of me training myself and learning from coaches that I worked with directly, and learning from all the reading and listening that I was doing. But I can't even imagine someone wanting to be a trainer or a coach and doing one certification, and then you just plop there in the middle, and you literally have no idea what to do. You read that book that told you to 5 sets of 5 was strength, and you needed to progress from 75 to 85% over 4 weeks. Like, that doesn't tell you anything about what you actually need to do once you're with a person, or how you need to talk to them.
Get them to listen to you and be a client is step one. Then
exactly.
Step two is find out the plan.
How do you map your vocabulary on their own model of their own understanding of the world? Like what preconceived notions that they come to you with? Like, do they think they need to do crunches to lose belly fat? How do you navigate that? Do you just tell them no and then show you that you know better? Or do you maybe focus on other things that you can find common ground on at first, and then over time educate them slowly but surely so that they can maybe have a better understanding of what is required for them to succeed. Yeah, it's totally undervalued, and it should be a much bigger focus for those types of certifications. Yeah,
that is the world we're in now, and we've got to do that side of it. Well, we've done that side of it ourselves. Hopefully, at some point, it will be implemented. I think I'm going to wrap up there, Sean. I know we've both got things in 10 minutes. So, if anyone's listening or watching, what's the best way to get hold of you?
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot for having me on. It was a great pleasure to chat, and I hope your listeners and viewers have gotten something out of it. Obviously, if anybody has questions on the few technical stuff that I mentioned, feel free to reach out to me. I'm everywhere you can find me. So any social platform under Upside Strength, which is the name of my company. I've got a pretty active YouTube channel. So I post on my podcast there. I do other videos as well. I do a lot of videos in French nowadays because I have a pretty big following based in France and Switzerland. But my Instagram is kind of half and half, English and French. But yeah, you can literally find me anywhere you want. Podcasts as well. So
on the first Instagram stalk, I was like, oh God, is he speak French? I can't message this guy. But obviously, as you can tell, he's perfect. I would say mother tongue English as well. So
I actually learned it later. Well, I spoke English since I was a kid, but I didn't have that level of English that kind of came later on with, obviously having to work in Vancouver and they only speak English there. So that came along the way. But I spoke French since I speak French better than I speak English. I would say that now on the training side, I'm still a little bit ahead on my vocabulary and my my speaking very broadly in English, simply because I learned everything in English when I was in Vancouver. And so coming back here and literally having to relearn all the terms, all the technical terms. I still make so many mistakes when I speak about training in French. And I read a lot of stuff in English, and then I have to try to translate them. And then sometimes the terms don't exist. It's a bit of a challenge, but I do the best that I can with what I have.
Viv does that. My fiance, she obviously came to England and she did almost all of her courses in English. And then when we came back, we joined a gym and they found out we were coaches and they asked her to do a workshop. And it was an animal flow workshop, which is pretty specific terminology. And I was Instagram boyfriend that day. I was just taking photos and whatever. And I remember a few times she would just get stuck not a few times, often she would get stuck for her words. And these members or people paying money would have to say, it's this or whatever it was. But yeah, I get it. Sweet. So if you want to get hold of Sean, you know where to do it. If you're listening and you want to ask me questions, you can drop me an email, or if you're in the Facebook group, then comment and I will pass the questions over. But cheers, Sean. I really appreciate it, mate. It's been a good chat about a few other things, but it's good to find out about you and your rugby and where you've come from. And yeah, it's been a great show. So cheers for your time, buddy.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Cheers, buddy.